when I was doing the historical series for Daily Wire and Empire of Terror and the Cold War, you've got this. You're like Dorothy in the middle of the tornado. There's just, here comes a cow, here's a woman on a bike, and all of this stuff that you can pull from, and the trick to it is, what can humans connect to? What in this enormous tapestry of horror or war or whatever, what are the actual human things that people can connect to? And that storytelling aspect of it, I think, is always about finding the little thing among the big things that can take a person listening to the story and say, okay, I can imagine myself in that world and in that environment.
Obviously we go wherever you want with this, but you mentioned the audience before. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's so important, whether it's a cold crowd or a hot crowd, whether you're broadcasting, whether you're podcasting. On the one hand, it's so important to know who you're talking to. But on the other hand, when you talk about your favorite comedians, who are those people really? Are they people who have focus grouped their work? Are they looking at No, man. They're people who are trying to amuse themselves.
Yeah. When Sam Kinison came out and said, "You live in a desert," nobody approved. No committee ever approved that. I thought I was going to have a brain hemorrhage.
I did too, man. That was the single funniest thing I felt like
I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, and maybe on paper, no. Maybe in a prompter, no. But that level of outrage combined with that much truth took my breath away.
That's it. Outrage and truth, yeah.
But look,
that guy could tell a story.
Oh my God. I think too, oh man, I'm not supposed to talk about this moment, but it so makes the point. I was invited to speak years ago in the Grove of the Bohemian Club.
Were you?
Yeah, and I did. It was and it was amazing. It was amazing, and I'm not going to tell any stories out of school because I'm not even supposed to tell this much. But it's such an important point, and my story has nothing to do with my speech, which killed, I'm happy to say. In fact, it wound up launching the foundation that I run today, because among the billionaires in the audience were some men who really wanted to support my efforts and did. So you just never know where a story's going to go. But here's the point of this one. That night, they do a thing called the Grove Play. And the play is one performance only. And it is an original musical brought to life with wonderful actors and people who play first chair in various symphonies all over the country. And I was blown away by this because I did 6 years in the Baltimore Opera when I was a kid. Talk about storytelling. You could really dig into the opera. That's everything you need to know about stories.
You were singing in the opera?
Yeah.
Well, that explains your vocal mastery.
Well, look,
because you're unparalleled at that. That's just that. This entire storytelling beat has been about the idea of the simplicity of a guy with a microphone who can hold your interest for half an hour without any of the other bags, tools that we have in the tool bag, right? Music, pacing, lighting. No, it's just plain voice and story. So I did not know that about you, but that explains a lot.
No, my whole start, I crashed an audition for the Baltimore Opera in 1984. They had open calls every Thursday, last Thursday of the month. And if you could get a union card, mm-hmm. the American Guild of Musical Artists, you could buy your Screen Actors Guild card. Oh. And the problem back then was I couldn't get an agent to represent me. I was only 22. I hadn't done anything. And the work I wanted to audition for was under the SAG imprimatur. And I couldn't get an agent if I hadn't done SAG work. And I couldn't do SAG work without my union card. So I learned the shortest aria I could find, Puccini, La Boheme, crashed an audition, somehow got in, and wound up staying for 6 years because, oh my God, dude, the stories and the music combined, and the girls, it was such a unique environment, and I'll never forget it, and I'll never forget the audiences either, because if you're in the audience at the opera, you know you must be this tall to get on that ride, right? You know what's coming. It's only going to be one of the 7 stories that exist. It's going to be told with unapologetic grandeur. There's going to be, I mean, nothing about it is real. And yet, for some reason, when the opera is truly grand, it's actually very modest and very powerful. And I didn't know it till I saw it, you know.
You know, when I met my wife, she was living in Russia, and I when I asked her to come visit in America, I asked her if she wanted to meet in New York, because I had seen the Broadway version. This would be 2016. I'd seen the Broadway version of Les Miserables a year earlier, and it was about to close, and it's simply the best thing I've ever seen in my life. And in the final 20 minutes of that show, you've got this enormous Broadway theater full of thousands of people. Everybody's openly sobbing. It's not like people are dabbing their eyes. You can just hear these choked back sobs, and we're walking out to the street, and I had this really interesting thought, Mike, and maybe we'll close the storytelling beat on this, because as I was walking out to the street, I thought, well, here I go out into the real world, and then I just grabbed myself by the back of the collar and just said, no. That's the real world. That's the real world back there. Everything about humanity is in the room you're leaving, not the room you're going into. Les Miserables has every human interaction: father, daughter, brother, sister, lover, girlfriend, got all of it. And I remember feeling so clearly that I was not leaving dreamland. I was walking into dreamland. That while I was in the theater for those 3 hours, that was when I was the most fully awake and actualized and experiencing all of these emotions and just riding with it. And I'm feeling, this tremendous sadness, when she's singing about the man who never came back, and it's just ripping your heart out, and all of this in the suffering of Valjean.
I dreamed a dream in time gone by.
Yes.
That's Fantine singing that song, and that, oh my God, dude. That's Victor Hugo, writing one of the greatest stories ever told, brought to life ingeniously. If you haven't seen it, find the conversation with the producers who were on the brink of despair because they couldn't find Valjean. They just couldn't find him. And then Colm Wilkerson walks in and sings.
And then he sings, and then the chorus, and people who were, you could just tell, you could just look around the room in New York, and you could just see people, and I don't mean to put a stamp on it, but this is just the sense I got, is that people who clearly, in many cases, struck me as people who were professional atheists, are looking at the redemption of this man dying and essentially ascending to heaven on the basis of his spiritual merit. And they're weeping, and they're just sobbing as loud as they can, just the penetrating power of it, just to knock something into your head, and that sense that the real world is out there on the streets of New York City. But once we got out onto the streets of New York City, you start going back until you start filtering out the traffic noise. You start filtering out this. You don't see the interactions with people. But back in that room for 3 hours, I felt like I was really in the real world that we're supposed to live in, at least for some of the time.
Back to Aristotle, just for a moment. All great stories have these peripeteias. It's the moment when the protagonist realizes everything he thought he knew about the world was wrong. In fact, Aristotle said that the definition of a tragedy was that moment in the narrative when the protagonist comes face to face with the inescapable truth of his own identity, right? And, when I watched Les Mis, I don't know that I was consciously thinking about that, but like most people, I'm watching the story of Valjean. I'm watching the story of redemption. I'm watching all these things. But you know what, man? That story isn't a story without Javert.
No, of course not.
That story, to me, all comes down to the moment when Javert realizes everything he thought he knew about the world was wrong. That is peripatetic. He's on the bridge and he's looking up at the stars and he sings there in their multitude. I mean, oh my God, it's
Yeah, I swear by the stars,
and then at the end it's nothing but cold and dark and uncaring. And this man, who is this man? What sort of devil is he? He had me caught in his trap, then he let me go free. It was his hour at last to put his seal on my fate, right? He can't reconcile the kindness. He can't reconcile the very redemption he was given by a guy who deserved it. Knowing
because what Valjean does invalidates his entire existence. All of the criminals that he's put away, all of the subhuman filth that he's put into the Bastille for the good of society, he realizes any one of them could have been those people. Any one of them, his entire moral structure just collapses,
right,
and he's got no choice. He's got no choice but to fall. Right, that's all he can do.
There's another moment too, since we're going full, theater geek. I had no idea you were afflicted by this as well, but man, your listeners would be well advised to Google the moment in Sweeney Todd.
I love that show.
When George Hearn actually loses his mind with Angela Lansbury, and he's got the beetle, right? He's got the guy who has taken his wife, destroyed his life. He's got him in the chair. He's got the blade at his throat. And he gets away. And in that moment, he vows to take his vengeance on all of humanity. Whoever comes to his chair will pay the price. And I've never seen, talk about storytelling, man, that song, that soliloquy, I think it's called Epiphany in the libretto. When Sweeney Todd changes, he has his peripeteia. Mm-hmm. I've just never seen anything sung / hollered, but still be beautiful. The hair goes up on the back of my neck. I was in the second row the first time he killed a guy in his chair, and the effect, first of all, when the blade goes across the neck, you hear stick. You hear it. It echoes in the theater. And then little bits of red, I guess it was just red dyed water or something. I don't know what it was, but it flew into the audience. They splattered people in the face with blood.
That's how you now you got their attention.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
And of all the props I ever saw on stage ever, the one prop that I'll never forget the most was the absolute mirror finish on his razor blade when he says, "My arm is complete again," and it's just a spotlight just hits that mirror, and it's just like, oh, good Lord.
Yeah. So let me bring it back around to the audience, just because I love the idea that you shared this experience in Les Mis with a sold-out house in Broadway, and it was communal, and it was powerful, and you went back into the world, all of you, somewhat changed as a result of it, knowing, as you do, that there'll be 8 more performances that week, and more audiences will come, and they'll go into the world, and they will have been moved and touched by this thing. Imagine, that was 30 years ago, Bill. What are the odds that you and I are sitting here talking about it now?
And people wonder, regular people wonder why actors and writers would, what's the word I'm looking for, mutilate their lives the way that they do in order to stay in this business. And then you realize, no, you get to make that happen. You get to be a part of that 8 times a week. It's worth every penny. It's worth every penny you never made.